The old Victorian house stood at the end of a winding, tree-lined street, its weathered facade telling stories of generations past. With peeling paint and a front porch adorned with creaky wooden steps, it was a relic of time, echoing laughter and heartfelt conversations held within its walls. This home had belonged to my grandmother, a woman whose warmth and wisdom had shaped my childhood. After her passing just months ago, I inherited not only the house but a treasure trove of memories that felt more like an embrace than mere bricks and mortar. As I stepped through the front door for the first time since the funeral, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. The scent of aged wood and lavender lingered in the air, a fragrance she loved. I wandered from room to room, each corner filled with echoes of her life: the sun-drenched kitchen where she baked cookies on rainy afternoons, the cozy living room lined with family portraits, each telling our story. It was more than just property, it was a sanctuary that held pieces of my heart. Yet, as I began to settle into this familiar yet new chapter, I couldn't shake off an uneasy feeling that had started to creep in. Karen, my neighbor who had often been more nosy than friendly, seemed to have taken an interest in my affairs since my grandmother's passing. Her prying eyes watched as I moved boxes and arranged furniture. Little did I know that her curiosity would soon morph into something far more sinister. In the days following my inheritance, Karen's whispers turned into accusations that would challenge not just my right to stay in my own home but also the very fabric of what family meant to me. Little did she realize that this house was not merely where I lived, it was a testament to love and resilience, one that I intended to defend fiercely. Karen lived 2 houses down the street, a figure whose presence seemed larger than life despite her petite frame. With tightly curled hair always styled in a perfect bun and oversized glasses perched on her nose, she had a penchant for keeping tabs on the neighborhood. To many, she was simply the well-intentioned neighbor who offered unsolicited gardening advice or baked goods that were often more crumbly than sweet. However, beneath that seemingly friendly facade lay an inquisitive nature that frequently crossed into intrusive territory. Our families had a long-standing history intertwined with the street's evolution, but Karen had always maintained a peculiar distance. As children, we'd played together under the same sun-drenched sky, yet as adults, grumbles of competition for the perfect yard or best holiday decor created a rift. It was clear she took pride in being the unofficial arbiter of neighborhood standards, and when my grandmother passed away, it appeared that her watchful eye honed in on me and my inherited home. Driven by a mix of jealousy and self-appointed authority, Karen began to scrutinize my every move. Perhaps it was her belief that someone so young and inexperienced couldn't possibly appreciate such a historic property, as if age alone granted wisdom over one's living circumstances. Or maybe it was an insatiable need for control that pushed her to question my legality as a resident. Fueled by rumors shared among other neighbors and her own suspicions, she concocted the story that I was illegally squatting in my family's home. Little did she realize that with each accusation, she not only underestimated my resolve but also the depth of connection I held to this house, a bond built on love and memory that would ultimately prove stronger than her misguided attempts to drive me out. It was an unseasonably warm afternoon when the confrontation finally erupted. I had just finished unpacking a box of my grandmother's cherished memorabilia, a few remnants of her life that I hoped would help me feel grounded in this new chapter. As I placed a vase on the mantel, I heard the front door creak open. Glancing over my shoulder, I spotted Karen standing in the doorway, her hands on her hips, a look of disapproval etched across her face. "Are you living here illegally?" she snapped without preamble, her voice sharp enough to cut through the warmth of the afternoon sun. My heart dropped, it felt as if she had thrown cold water on my sanctuary. "I've seen you moving in, and it's quite clear you don't have any renter's rights." Stunned, I set the vase down gently and faced her. "Karen, this is my grandmother's house. I inherited it," I replied evenly, trying to maintain my composure despite the rising tension. "I have every right to be here." She scoffed at my words, stepping further into the entryway as though to invade my space and assert her dominance. "But how can you possibly manage a house like this? You're far too young and inexperienced," she retorted, her condescension palpable. Her tone struck a nerve, igniting a fire in me that had been simmering since her first intrusive glances. "You don't know anything about me," I shot back, my voice steady but laced with frustration. "This house is filled with family history, and I intend to honor that legacy." The atmosphere crackled with unspoken emotions as Karen's eyes narrowed, clearly unfazed by my declaration. "I'll be watching you," she said before turning on her heel and leaving me standing there, breathless with anger and disbelief. It was at that moment I realized this wouldn't be a simple adjustment. Defending my rightful place in this home would be an uphill battle against someone who had made it her mission to undermine me. Fueled by a mix of jealousy and a misguided sense of authority, Karen decided to take matters into her own hands by involving the police. In her mind, calling law enforcement would lend credibility to her claims that I was trespassing in my own home. She had seen her own narrative twisted by the neighborhood gossip mill, granting her a warped sense of justification for her actions. For someone who prided herself on being the arbiter of all things neighborhood-related, getting the police involved felt like the ultimate means to not only vindicate herself but also to assert control over the situation. The very next day, as I was sorting through boxes in the living room, I heard sirens approaching in the distance. My heart sank. The familiar sound became a harbinger of impending confrontation. Sure enough, moments later, 2 police officers knocked on my door, their faces calm yet serious as they introduced themselves. "Ma'am, we received a call regarding a possible squatter at this address," one officer stated, scanning the interior of my grandmother's beloved home with an air of suspicion. A rush of indignation surged through me as I realized Karen's plan was now in motion. "I live here. This is my grandmother's house, and I recently inherited it," I explained, trying to keep my composure while feeling my heart race under their scrutiny. One officer nodded sympathetically but took down notes while the other gestured for me to provide proof of ownership. As I fumbled through paperwork and family photos, I sensed Karen lurking nearby, her expression smug with anticipation that justice would soon be served. But little did she know that instead of validating her claims, this encounter would unravel her deceit. As I presented my inheritance documents, an unfamiliar sense of confidence began to swell within me. This was not just about property rights, it was about reclaiming my family's legacy and proving my rightful place within these walls. As I stood there, surrounded by the familiar warmth of my grandmother's home, a whirlwind of emotions surged within me. The disbelief that someone I had known for years, a neighbor who had once shared casual conversations over the fence, could stoop so low was almost overwhelming. How could Karen, who had always prided herself on being the neighborhood watch, take such drastic measures against me, especially when I was simply trying to honor my grandmother's legacy? The shock quickly morphed into a simmering anger. It felt surreal that I was being branded as a squatter in a house that was filled with memories of love and laughter. This was no mere property, it was the heartbeat of my childhood, and the thought of losing it to Karen's petty jealousy felt like an affront not only to me but to my family's history. But beneath the disbelief and anger lay a growing determination. I was not just an heir, I was the custodian of my grandmother's memory. Each corner of this house echoed her laughter, every room bore witness to our family gatherings, and I felt an unwavering sense of responsibility to protect that legacy. The more I thought about Karen's accusations, the more resolute I became to defend my right to be there. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the tide of emotion swirling within. Karen may have thought she could bully me into submission, but she underestimated my resolve. With each passing moment, clarity replaced uncertainty. This was about more than just property rights, it was about reclaiming my rightful place in my family's story and ensuring that my grandmother's cherished home would continue to be a sanctuary for generations to come. No person, and certainly not a jealous neighbor, would take that away from me without a fight. The tension in the air thickened as I paced the living room, waiting for the police to arrive. With each tick of the clock, my heart raced faster, a turbulent mix of anxiety and indignation tightening my chest. I could already envision Karen's smug expression as she relished the thought that she had successfully painted me as an intruder in my own home. How could she conjure such a narrative from nothing? When the sound of sirens finally pierced through the stillness, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The police car rolled to a stop outside, its lights flashing ominously, casting surreal shadows against the walls of my grandmother's once comforting home. 2 officers stepped out, one tall and imposing, with an air of authority, while the other was slightly shorter but bore an empathetic expression. The very presence of law enforcement filled me with dread. This was supposed to be a sanctuary, not a stage for dispute. Karen was already waiting outside, her posture exuding confidence as she explained her version of events to the officers, her hands animatedly gesturing toward me inside the house. Her tone dripped with self-righteousness, painting herself as the vigilant neighbor merely looking out for societal norms. I could hear snippets of her exaggerated claims slipping through the open window, how I was allegedly trespassing and how this could disrupt the perfect order of our little community. With each word she spoke, my anxiety morphed into a simmering anger. How dare she twist reality so blatantly? I took a deep breath to steady myself, reminding myself that I had nothing to hide. As I prepared to face the officers, I felt a flicker of resolve spark within me. This was not only about proving my legitimacy but also about reclaiming my narrative against Karen's manipulative portrayal. I wouldn't let her take control of this moment or diminish my rightful place in my grandmother's home. As the officers stepped across the threshold, I felt an unexpected surge of determination mixed with my lingering anxiety. This was my moment to prove my legitimacy, not just to them but to myself. I took a deep breath and gestured for the officers to follow me into the living room, where I had piled a few crucial documents on the coffee table earlier in anticipation of this confrontation. Please, let me show you what I have, I said, trying to sound calm despite the pounding in my chest. As they listened intently, I began sorting through my grandmother's papers. The first document was her will, clearly stating that she bequeathed her beloved home to me. My fingers trembled slightly as I pointed out the section that named me as the sole heir. The taller officer leaned closer, examining the document with professionalism and curiosity. You have legal ownership? He asked, seeking clarification. Yes, I responded earnestly, feeling a flicker of hope ignite within me. And this house has been in my family for generations. As I sifted through more papers, I pulled out old photographs showcasing my grandmother with her family, pictures from holidays spent in this very house, each snapshot bursting with life and love. I shared stories about family gatherings held here, Thanksgiving dinners where laughter filled the air and summer afternoons spent on the porch watching fireflies dance at twilight. With each tale, I could see the expressions of the officers soften. This wasn't just paperwork, it was a legacy steeped in history and emotion. Finally, I produced a property deed dated back decades. This house has belonged to us since before I was born, I asserted firmly, turning to face Karen as she stood outside watching through window panes, her expression shifting from smugness to disbelief. In that moment, as doubt flickered across her face and determination surged within me, it became clear, this home was mine by right and by love. No amount of jealousy or accusations would change that truth. With the evidence laid out before them, the officers turned their attention to Karen, giving her an opportunity to elaborate on her claims. The taller officer leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, as he asked her to explain why she believed I was squatting in my own home. Her confidence remained intact as she recounted her version of events, painting herself as the concerned neighbor who simply wanted to protect the neighborhood. I've seen them moving in without any notice, Karen asserted, a hint of indignation creeping into her voice. There was no for sale sign, and no one in the community was informed. It's just not right. Her tone dripped with self-righteousness, but the officers listened carefully, jotting down notes and exchanging glances that hinted at their skepticism. As she spoke, I noticed inconsistencies in her narrative. She mentioned things like the new owners and sudden changes, but I had been there for weeks now, slowly unpacking my grandmother's belongings while familiarizing myself with each room. The officers began to dig deeper into her claims, questioning when exactly she had witnessed these supposed transgressions. So you're saying you saw them moving in? One officer probed gently. Karen hesitated for a moment, clearly trying to recall specific dates but faltering under scrutiny. Well, it was around the time of the funeral, she managed weakly. I seized this moment of doubt and interjected calmly. I've been here since my grandmother passed away. The first few days were naturally chaotic as I sorted through everything. The officers nodded thoughtfully, clearly noticing Karen's vague recollections contrasted against my detailed account filled with personal anecdotes about my family legacy in the house. Despite experiencing a whirlwind of emotions inside, anger at Karen's unfounded accusations and anxiety about how this investigation would unfold, I kept my composure throughout their questioning. My calm demeanor seemed to provide credibility to my claims while further unraveling Karen's narrative. As they continued their inquiry, it became apparent that her attempts to undermine me were beginning to backfire significantly. The truth was laying itself bare amidst her fabrications. The room was thick with tension as the officers exchanged glances after Karen stumbled over her words. Their notes were filled with clear contrasts between her vague accusations and my detailed accounts. I could sense the shift in their demeanor, a cautious skepticism of Karen's claims growing stronger. After some deliberation, the taller officer turned to me, his voice steady and authoritative. Ma'am, based on the documents you've provided and your reasonable explanation of your residency here, it's clear that you have every right to be in this home. Relief washed over me, bringing a warmth that contrasted sharply with earlier anxieties. They shifted their focus back to Karen, who was still standing defiantly at the door. We appreciate your concern as a neighbor, the officer said diplomatically, but the information you've provided does not substantiate your claims. You should understand that calling us for such accusations can create unnecessary conflict within the community. It felt like a moment of triumph as they addressed her unfounded allegations head-on. Karen's confidence faltered visibly, her flushed cheeks betraying her frustration. But they didn't even notify anyone, she began, but the officer cut her off. Legally, that is irrelevant. Unless there's proof of wrongdoing, we cannot act on mere suspicion. His calm demeanor contrasted with her agitation, highlighting just how baseless her attempts to undermine my rightful ownership were. I took a deep breath, allowing myself a moment of reflection. This wasn't only about the officers validating my place, it was about reclaiming my home from someone who tried to manipulate community norms for personal gain. As Karen stood there simmering, it was evident that she had lost this round, and I intended to ensure it stayed that way. With every word spoken, I felt more rooted in my legacy, resolved to keep my grandmother's cherished memory alive in the home we had shared for so long. As the officers concluded that I had every right to be in my home, the weight of the moment fell heavy on Karen. Her expression transformed from one of feigned confidence to one of pure disbelief, the color draining from her face as she processed the reality of her defeat. She stood frozen at the door, mouth slightly agape, as if struggling to form words that could mend the dissonance between her expectations and what had just unfolded. But they didn't follow protocol, she stammered, her voice shaky. The polished veneer of community champion she often portrayed shattered with each word. You can't just let them stay here. The urgency in her plea was palpable, revealing her desperation to hold on to the control she believed she had over the situation. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions calm and professional. "Ma'am," one officer said firmly yet respectfully, "we have thoroughly reviewed the situation and your claims lack substantiation. The law is clear, without evidence to support your accusation, we cannot intervene." As Karen's arguments faltered, I could sense a shift in her demeanor. The self-righteous facade crumbled further under the scrutiny of those in authority. She turned toward me, eyes narrowing with simmering resentment. "This isn't over," she spat bitterly, though it was clear she felt defeated. I steadied myself against the old wooden frame of the door, a sense of newfound strength swelling within me. This moment not only marked a win for my rightful place in my grandmother's house but also illuminated how far Karen would go to impose her will on others. As the officers prepared to leave, I felt a profound sense of resolution wash over me. I wouldn't allow fear or bullying to overshadow my connection to this cherished legacy. While Karen might have lost this battle today, it was evident that she still held on to her stubbornness. However, I was ready to defend my sanctuary fiercely against anyone who dared challenge my place within it again. In the days following the confrontation, a sense of peace settled over me as I resumed my life in my grandmother's home. The weight of uncertainty had lifted, replaced by a fortified resolve to cherish and protect this legacy. I immersed myself in the house's comforting embrace, taking time to restore its beauty while honoring the memory of those who had come before me. Each room became a canvas for my memories, filled with stories that echoed through the walls. However, the aftermath of my encounter with Karen rippled through the neighborhood. While some neighbors expressed their support, others seemed hesitant, unsure of how to navigate the tension that had surfaced. Karen's reputation took a hit as her aggressive tactics became known, revealing her vindictive nature. Conversations once tinged with friendly exchanges now contained an undercurrent of suspicion toward her. I could see it in their eyes when we crossed paths, an acknowledgement that she had overstepped her bounds. As for my relationship with Karen, it was irreparably altered. She no longer approached me with casual banter or idle gossip. Instead, there was a palpable distance between us, marked by an unspoken understanding that I would stand my ground. Though she still lived 2 houses down, her attempts at intimidation felt futile now. With each passing week, I realized I had not only secured my place in our community but also fortified it against any future challenges. I became more involved with my neighbors, sharing stories of my grandmother and inviting them to help restore the garden she cherished so dearly. Through these interactions, I discovered a deep connection to my community that transcended past grievances and misunderstandings. As I moved forward, I embraced this new chapter not just as the guardian of my grandmother's home but as an active participant in the fabric of our neighborhood, a place where love and resilience could flourish despite past conflicts. Standing in the living room of my grandmother's old Victorian house, I took a moment to reflect on what it truly meant to inherit a home. This house was not just a structure made of wood and brick, it was a tapestry woven with memories, laughter, and love. Each corner held remnants of family gatherings, stories shared over meals, and quiet moments spent in reflection. Inheriting this home meant becoming its custodian, tasked with preserving the legacy of those who came before me while also shaping its future. The journey through the recent turmoil had been challenging, exposing the complexities of family dynamics and the often unexpected tension that can arise in a community. My confrontation with Karen taught me that standing up for one's rights is not merely an act of defiance but a necessary step in asserting one's identity and place within a lineage. It reinforced the idea that defending my family's history was not just about property ownership, it was about acknowledging the emotional ties that bind us to our roots. Through this experience, I learned the importance of resilience, not only for myself but also for others who might face similar challenges. The community around me served as both support and witness to my commitment to honor my grandmother's memory. I realized that true belonging extends beyond walls, it is about connections forged through understanding and shared experiences. Moving forward, I felt empowered to advocate for myself and others against unjust accusations or misunderstandings. I understood that inheritance encompasses more than tangible assets. It carries the weight of responsibility, pride, and an unwavering commitment to uphold the values instilled by those we love. In this space filled with history, I found my footing, not just as an heir but as an active participant in a legacy that would continue to thrive despite adversity.